Hey, bookworms, this is Megan coming at you with another Cantina Conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Cynthia Pelayo. We are talking about her book, Forgotten Sisters, that is available on March 19th. So by the time you're listening to this episode, it might already be available. So keep that in mind. I really enjoyed this conversation with Cynthia. We got into the eerie, creepy themes in her book and I just speculated on ghosts in the spiritual world, but I'll let you guys get to it. Here is Cynthia Pelayo. So today we've got Cynthia Pelayo. We are talking about Forgotten Sisters that comes out on March 19th. Cynthia, thanks so much for joining me today. This was such like you set the tone, you set the vibe, like eerie and creepy. And I'm also based in the Chicago area, so I was in it. I thought it was so cool what you offered in this story with the setting and everything. We'll get into it. I thought it was really cool. I really enjoyed reading this. I enjoyed meeting Anna and Jenny, all that good stuff. We'll get into it, but I'm excited to chat with you today.
Thank you for having me. This is fun. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, absolutely. To get started, can you share like a summary synopsis of the book so people can follow along with the conversation?
Yes. So Forgotten Sisters is a mystery, it's a genre blending story. And it's genre blending because it incorporates mystery, gothic, thriller, history, romance. I blend genre in my novels. And the story follows Anna and Jenny, who live in a historic bungalow along the Chicago River in the Ravenswood neighborhood. And they start noticing men being drowned outside of their home in the river. And eventually, two detectives come calling because they have made a connection between the house where the sisters live and the potential killer.
Yeah, that was, I love how you acknowledge that you tend to mix genres because I think that just adds a little bit. It definitely allows for more creativity in a sense, and also just adding a little bit more for everybody. Um, Because yeah, there's that investigative side, and then there's contemporary part of it, but then you get into the spooky vibes of it, and it was really cool to to how you meshed it all together and made it work. So I want to start off with going into your background because you do have a handful of published works, and I don't know, I'm just like checking out your website here, and I don't know, I love all the covers. I don't know if you go for to a consistent person, but I like every cover, it's so different of your previous works, but I like all of them. But yeah, so can you go into like your previous works and how like maybe what led you to bringing Forgotten Sisters to the world?
So I was a journalist for a long time. I have a day job. I work in marketing research, but for years I was a journalist by night and a researcher by day. And eventually I could no longer do journalism because I did community news and that emotional inner city crime. I grew up in the inner city, but it just became overwhelming for me. And I think eventually I just had PTSD from covering things. And so I still wanted to write. I was always a writer in high school. I always wrote for the paper or the magazine. And I essentially begged the School of the Art Institute to let me in. And they let me in somehow with only a journalism background. And they were like, "What do you want to do?" And I was like, "I don't know what I want to do. I know I want to write." And they were like, "Okay, but this is a fiction writing program." I'm like, "Yeah, but I could no longer do journalism. I need help. I want to write." And so they paired me with Jessie Ball, who was like my favorite writer of all time, and Ruth Margraf. And at the time, Ball was writing a lot of fairy tales, and Ruth Margraf is a playwright. And I started just taking courses in detective fiction and fairy tales, and I started writing while I was there. And my graduate advisors were like, "You're a horror writer who doesn't know she's a horror writer." And I was like, "Good thing." And I always loved horror. It was like my secret. And I wouldn't really tell people because back then, like in the 80s, there was like stigma. There was like really bad stigma. I used to get bullied a lot for watching horror. And so I never really talked about like my obsession with horror. Even my husband, like we were like friends in high school and he didn't even know until like after we got married. He's like, "No, you're really into horror. I didn't know you were this into horror." And I just fell in love with things like Agatha Christie and Edgar Allan Poe and fairy tales as well. And so as I started writing, I was like, I want to include everything. Why do I just have to stick to one thing? And so I just started blending everything in, and that's pretty consistent with my work. And I know on the one hand, it makes people mad, and so I do I do lose a lot of readers, and then on the other hand, I open it up to different readers. And I'm also a poet, so I write poetry as well. So I also incorporate a lot of lyrical or musical elements into the writing style. And for me, it's exciting and it keeps me interested. And I figure if I'm interested, I'm going to finish it. So that's why I do so much because it's fun for me.
Yeah, I that's a really common answer response with authors. It's just like they write what they like to see, what they like to read, and then they a lot of the times, yeah, they like throw their little spin on it. But I love how you were just like maybe a little closeted about your love for horror because you were like, "Ooh," but then now I love that you eventually were like, "You know what? I'm just gonna find my people." Like, you just find your people, you find your audience, you find your community,
Yeah.
and yeah, and that's really as simple as it is, and so I think that's, like, for so many authors. I think I was speaking to someone who was, like, into that blood, like, splatter punk, like like, the gritty type, and he
Yeah.
was talking about how when he was growing up, he didn't same sentiment, like, he was, like, quiet about it, he didn't really 'cause he figured, "Oh, maybe people might think this is weird," and I'm like, "No, like, you look around, you find your people these days." I think also on being online, it probably makes it easier to find your communities, but yeah, I think that's just a matter of finding the right audience.
Yes. And I grew up in the 80s and the 90s where we didn't have internet or social media. And I can't even imagine what it's like today for teenagers and young people because who was in your neighborhood and who was in your community, that was it.
Oh,
And
yeah.
I was, and I was listening to Nirvana and I had green hair. And in my high school at the time, nobody had green hair and nobody listened to Nirvana. And I used to get bullied because of those types of things. And now it's completely okay to spread beyond because people do have, you can tap into a global community. I was thinking just growing up, I didn't have a community of people that liked horror. It was just me. I would go to the video rental store with my dad and rent horror movies. Like I couldn't like all the neighbor kids thought I was weird and they would bully me because I was like renting Hellraiser at 9 and you shouldn't watch Hellraiser at 9, but I was watching Hellraiser at 9. But it must I don't know, it's double-edged sword, right? Cuz I wish I had that community or a community period because I was so lonely. I was a weird, lonely kid, and I'm a weird adult. But at least I have people that I can reach out to and just say and talk to and connect with about my similar interests. So that's nice. That's the nice thing about the internet. I didn't have the internet growing up.
Yeah, oh, I was like, "Poor little baby Cynthia."
It was a weird. The 80s were a weird. Where, and my husband and I were just talking about it. We're like, people like us just don't exist anymore, right? I'm like, no, people don't remember what it was like to like have the telephone in the kitchen and then you would grab the phone and you would walk this long cord into your room and then you're like hiding under the bed sheets talking to like your little boyfriend or your crush and then your mom like picks up the other phone and is like
Yep.
listening in on your conversation and it's like Cynthia get people don't know the trauma that we live with.
I know, they didn't earn their stripes, damn
Yeah,
it.
it's a weird
I know, I'm not I was born in the late '80s, so I get that the '90s sentiment of it, and but yeah, I definitely I remembered I
time. I
had
love
to there was no privacy on the phone, it was like you had to be there to pick up the phone if you were expecting a call, and if you weren't, it was like if your parents picked up, it was just like, "Oh god," like, now
it. It's
they
a
know.
nightmare. They picked up the phone on your friend and it's just oh god. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I was just my in the terms of, like, my best friend, it was really funny because obviously your close friends, they know your family, they know your parents, and he just like, "Jessica's on the phone!" So she would just hear it and be like, "Oh, okay," and just wait patiently, or she would, like my mom tends to answer the phone like she was rushing to get it, and so that was just always an inside joke, "Mom, are you okay?" Like, she's like, "Yeah, your mom okay?" Like, "No, yeah, she's fine." Like, she always picks up the phone like, "Hello?" Like, it's like she was almost gonna miss it, so it's really funny. I totally appreciate that sentiment of, like, yeah, you have to, like it was definitely a different time, for sure.
Yeah.
It was so funny. So, okay, so going off of like your previous releases and stuff and like finding your vibe, finding your flow, all that good stuff. How does the release of Forgotten Sisters compare to previous publications, previous releases? Cuz I don't know, like big lessons learned, anything, things like that?
Yeah. I think, well, Forgotten Sisters is my first traditional release. I've been writing and publishing. Well, I started writing as a journalist in 1999. And then I started publishing in fiction and short stories and poetry in about 2008. And I came up through like the independent indie scene where it was a lot of independent presses and independently owned presses. And at the time, it was very difficult to, even now, it's just difficult to query and get a literary agent. It took me 13 years to get to find my perfect literary agent. And the previous releases were, some of them were smaller indies. Eventually, I got placed with larger independent presses. But Forgotten Sisters is with Thomas and Mercer, and they are Amazon Publishing, which is it's massive. And so
Mhm.
scary in a way because it's more attention. And it's an expanded readership. And I don't know what that means now. It's been a whirlwind past like 12 months because I won the Bram Stoker Award the last May.
Yeah, congrats.
You. And I was the first Latina in history to win a Bram Stoker Award. So that was a lot of attention. And so I guess I'm just used to just sitting down and writing and finding a home for it. But now there's been greater interest. And this story, I feel like it has a wider reach and it was done that way on purpose because the story was very important to me. Uh, Historically, I think it's just a very important story that just hasn't been told, the actual event that happened. And I wanted to make sure that as many people read it and learned about this event as possible. So that's the biggest difference, that it's more people, a bigger release. It's a little
I
scary.
had never heard about that before, and I thought it was so fascinating and so like crazy. Like how it was such a because we'll try to be spoiler free, obviously, but that was like the event that was like mass casualty, and how why don't I know about it? I probably didn't dig deep enough, but still, I feel like even as like a Chicago native, I should have heard about it. I don't know.
I remember the first time learning about it, and I just thought it was a joke. I was like, what do you mean? And so the way I learned about it, and I'm trying to be spoilers free, so the listeners are gonna be like, what are they talking about? You have to read the
Yeah.
book. I remember we went, and I went through like a paranormal thing for a while. I was like really into like paranormal investigations, and I'm sorry to say, I don't believe in ghosts, but I'm fascinated by people that do, and I've done it all. I've done like the paranormal stuff. I've done the Bachelor's Grove. I love this stuff. I think it's so fascinating. And so we did that Al Capone tour, and we did like the Chicago ghost tour. And at one of the stops, they started talking to us about this event. And I was like, what do you mean this many people died? Like hundreds of people died here? And so I was outraged. And then when I learned about many of them were like immigrants, these were like German, Polish, Irish, Dutch, Greek. I'm like, oh my gosh. And many of these people that died, they came to Chicago. Many of them worked in um, the Western Electric factory. Chicago was populated by German, Irish, Polish immigrants, and many of them worked in the stockyards. And I just couldn't. Even now, I can't wrap my mind around so many people dying in the city on a single morning. Entire families were killed in a single morning. And I just cannot, it was so hard. It's so heartbreaking for me to believe that I just learned about this recently. And how did we not
Mhm.
talk about it? And I think about their families back in Ireland and their families back in Poland that were like waiting for them. And I'm sorry, the entire family died. It's
Yeah.
freaking.
It's sad because yeah, I was also like, I Googled it. I was like, wait, does this really happen?
It's like, how is this real? Yeah. Did you see?
Oh yeah, and you presented that so beautifully where I felt like I like to think I'm not heartless. I have sympathy even reading words on a page, but I just the whole vibe you sent, you transferred that empathy, that sympathy on the page for sure. Like that sadness, that loss, and also a little bit of that rage that people need to know. Like, why isn't this? not like necessarily common knowledge, but why do not people at least recognize the name of, yeah, yeah, recognize the name or whatever. And yeah, and I think unfortunately it is probably the fact that it was mostly immigrants had something to do with it for sure. And it makes it more heartbreaking because they came here to just start a life, get opportunities, make a living, and provide opportunities for their families and all that stuff. And then just something tragic like that happened.
And I just think it's a very American story. It's like these people came here and they worked in these very grueling manual labor jobs. And many of them didn't even, they still spoke their native language. And it's just so heartbreaking that happened to them, so many people. And so I hope that people can at least learn about the event. They can, I'm sure there's some descendants of families that still live in America, but like I said, it's a very American story. It was a very working class kind of people that this happened to, and that they all came here to establish this American dream. And they were living it. Many of them were
Yeah.
living it. They came here, they built houses, they worked, and it's so sad that I think it was an event that it was purposely forgotten because nobody ever was punished, or no one was ever held accountable for
Right.
being killed. And I think it was obvious who was at fault. The manufacturer, I don't want to spoil it, but it's clear it was
The thing.
the thing.
I'll just call it the thing.
But I think because they were immigrants from Europe, Eastern Europe, that they was forget this thing happened and let's just keep moving. It's so sad.
Yeah, and you can imagine, yeah, because it was all they all worked at the same place, and like, how do you keep that quiet when you've got to find replacements for like over half of your workforce? I'm here thinking about that logistics. Like, how did what?
They
I
were
guess it was just the times, like the context of the media anyway. I guess maybe it was easier to keep things not sensational. I don't know.
I know that I believe there was like a particular day that the city was essentially like shut down because of the number of funerals that were held. And for the people that want to believe in ghost stories, which I think they're beautiful ghost stories. But that morning or that evening, there were people that were reported seeing some of these individuals, and they were like, "What do you mean they're dead? I just saw them." And so, like that, even just makes the hair on my arm stand up because it's, there's I do believe in energy, and I do believe that we you cannot get rid of energy, and so I feel like there's maybe that's the way I believe in ghosts, but I do believe that something of them is still here with us and that should be thought of and recognized. I don't feel like we're ever truly forgotten, that we always leave an essence behind to the people that we touched and so on, and that repeats.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I definitely believe that, call it what you want, but yeah, the energy I think is probably a good general term for it. It's something there. And I don't know. I don't fuck with paranormal activity. If ghosts are real, I want to stay on their good side. I don't like I'm gonna mind my own business. You do you. I had the incident that comes to mind is I had an experience with a Ouija board like in high school, and I don't care. Okay, so I'm 37, so this was like a little over 20 years ago in high school. I don't care how people know how old I am, but I'm just saying 20 years later and I'm still like, so I was in the basement of my friend's house. It was late at night. It was just me and two of our friends, two of my friends, one that lived there, and I don't know why. And like we were young, little casual delinquents. We were like drinking a little bit, like getting high, obviously, but it was just like we were, I know I've confidently, like I wasn't trashed or anything because I remember these events. Like, I have confidence in myself. And so I just remember the Ouija board, and for some reason we busted it out and we started asking questions. And then we were like, "Are you pushing it? Are you pushing it? No, blah, blah, blah." And then it was like, the questions were being answered, and then it became apparent that it was a relative of my friend whose basement we were in. And so we were just continued asking questions, and we were at the time, her mom was like having some medical issues, like she was being monitored because like she had swollen ankles, So she was being monitored for certain things like her liquid intake and things like that. And my friend, she asked, "Is mom sneaking water?" And it said yes. So I think something was like, "Was she doing something she shouldn't be doing?" Yes. Are you worried about mom? Yes. Is she sneaking water? Like we were asking pretty much yes or no questions. Yes.
Yeah.
Like she's drinking water. She's not supposed to be, or at least not that much. And then also it was like we were asking various questions and there was just like the way that it was answered. I guess it just was like, oh, this is totally my uncle. He would totally answer this like that. And I just trusted the process. I was like, I'm not gonna fuck around. I'm just gonna be here. And then it was like late at night and like my car was parked on the street and we asked it like the spirit, oh, should Megan drive home right now? And it said no.
Like, I'm so
And yeah. And so I was like, okay, I just let my mom know, okay, I'm staying over, blah, blah, blah. Just so my parents know that I'm over at my friend's house and I'm staying over, whatever. And the next morning I walk out and there's a ticket on my car because it's parked on the street. And that was like a part maybe you shouldn't. It was weird. The streets of the suburbs are weird like that I wasn't fully aware of. But so I got a ticket and I look at the time and it was like around the time that we were doing that whole thing. Like it was like 1 in the morning. And so I was like, either this spirit like saved me either from getting an infraction from driving
yeah.
somebody, or they just said no, stay here and get a ticket. Even so, it was still like okay. And then later we found out that like my friend, she confronted her mom like, mom, have you been drinking water when no one's looking? Are you drinking more than you should be? And she admitted yeah. So that's
Yeah.
why I'm like, that's fine if you don't believe in ghosts. I don't fuck with that shit. I don't fuck with paranormal activity. I'm not gonna diminish that possibility. I'm not gonna downplay it. I'm open-minded because of that one experience. And then after that, I remember a group of my friends wanted to do it again, and I was like, "No, absolutely not. I'm not interested." But my husband wanted to, and so I was like, and they were like, "You can't be in a room like that. That's the big no. You can't be in the same room if you're not participating." So I was like, "All right, Godspeed. Have fun." Like I left. I entertain myself like elsewhere for that time being because I was like, absolutely not. I am not interested. Have fun. I don't know. And so it's for that reason why I'm like, even today, 20 years later, I'm like, nope, no, I'm not going to doubt it. I am not going to downplay it. I'm not going to deny it. I will be open that there's something. If any ghosts are like, in my house right now, even I'm like, as long as you don't fuck with me or my kids, you could be
Right.
here. We'll exist. We'll cohabitate peacefully in two different realms at the same time, whatever.
Yeah.
I'm like, I understand your sentiment, but I'm also like, you know what? I'm not like hard line either way, just
Yeah.
because I'm like,
My
it was
dad
so
died.
that shook me enough.
When my dad and I were like this, we were like close. We were super, super close. And he died last March. And I
Oh,
remember he did at home hospice. And so we were there with him. And so
okay,
when he died, it's just customary for us. We just kind of held vigil there and we were
yeah.
there. I remember at one point everybody left the room and I'm looking at him. I'm like, Dad, do not. I was like, do not come to me as a ghost. I will lose it. I will absolutely. I just remember like talking to him, like Dad, there, like, do not, Dad, please. I love you so much. But if you come to me as a ghost, I will lose my mind. I go crazy. And I told my mom that, and she was just like, I get it. But then a couple of weeks later, he comes to me in a dream, and he's Richard is bothering me, and I was like, what, Dad? He's Richard is bothering me, and he shouted at me, and Richard's my brother. I was like, and I sat up. It was like 4 a.m. Like Richard, and then I called my mom. I was like, Dad came to me in a dream, and he said Richard is bothering him, and she's, oh, I didn't want to tell you. Your brother's goes to the cemetery every day, sits there and drinks all day at the cemetery, and he's been going every day and just sits there like with wine, crying, and I'll talk to him. And I was like, all right, I didn't see him as a ghost, but at least he came to me in a dream. And my mom was like, there's no way you would have known that. Absolutely no way. It was your
Oh
father.
my God.
So that's
Well,
why
he respected your wish a little bit, right?
I would have lost. I would lose it if I saw him as a ghost. Like I would just, I think I would have a heart attack. And so yeah, I've done all the stuff. And I don't know. Maybe I guess I do believe. I wrote an essay years ago that I want to believe. I want to believe, and I guess my answer is just I believe we don't end. I believe there's energy there.
Yeah,
I mean,
I can agree with that sentiment. Like, we don't end.
we
I
don't.
think that's a generally agreed upon sentiment
Yeah.
that it can mean different things to different people, right?
Yeah. I want to believe that. I want to believe that if I was a ghost, I wouldn't just hang out here haunting the same house over and over again. That's where people are like, they go to these locations and it's like their spirit's trapped. I don't believe I guess maybe I don't believe that a spirit can be trapped at a certain. I'm gonna go hang out somewhere.
Yeah, like, I'm gonna travel the world. I'm gonna haunt some assholes. Like, I
Fun stuff. I'm not just gonna sit in the same old house that I grew up in and died. Like, why would I do that? That's yeah. I don't know. That's maybe.
oh, that's so funny. Yeah, piggyback it off of that because the house is like its own character in your book. And I love how Anna and Jenny are just reluctantly accepting it. They're just like, oh, like they hear it, but they don't say anything. They like just have that look with each other, and then oh, and then it's I want to dig into like the psyche of it with Anna because she's the home, she's the handy woman. She's the one fixing up the house and taking care of the house. I feel like there's some psychology there where she's just wants to keep the house happy, and she wants to maintain it and take care of it because her parents led her to believe, her grandma led her to believe, you take care of it, it'll take care of you. But it's I thought that was really cool how you made the house its own. It was definitely its own presence, more than just a habitat, right? It was like it was something more than that. So I want to explore like how you got into that and like your process of bringing that to the page.
I wanted to write about a haunting that starts to infect somebody. Not so much. I've heard someone refer to this as like a possession story, and I was like, huh, I guess in a way, maybe. I thought that was interesting. It was an interesting take because the house starts, the house is haunted, and the haunting kind of starts permeating all of Anna. And so there's maybe not this fear, but there's duty, this aspect of duty. And I thought about like duty with family, like you have to protect your family, and she was like the youngest, and she would take care of her family too, and take care of her sister, and so I wanted to write about somebody who lives in a haunted house. They know it's haunted, and the house will be like upset like a little child if you don't take care of it. And the haunting starts eventually permeating her language, her dress, everything about her. So I guess in a way, you have to think of it as it's slowly digging into her.
Yeah, I it was funny because I definitely saw the house as that. Like it was just like the house, if it were like a character, it was just, you can't do anything about it. You gotta take care of me. I'm gonna do what I want, and you can't do anything about it. And I don't care that it's like creeping you out, and but also love you. But like almost, yeah, like their little sister, little brother. Like you're still family. There's still that like familial affection, almost like the protection, but it's yeah, it's something's wrong and you got to figure it out. I'm like it's your job. And I just thought it was I don't know, I've never encountered that like in a book where it was just like I feel like some authors try to make the setting as its own like participating character, but you definitely pulled it off. I feel like with Forgotten Sisters where the house was like tough shit.
Get rid of me,
I
yeah.
really enjoyed it. Yeah.
Too. And I thought about too. It's like an extension of her family because her grandfather like built this house, and many of these houses in the Chicago area, these older homes were physically built by these immigrants that came from Europe and Eastern Europe. And so I wanted to write about that too. It's an extension of her family. She can't get rid of it. It's it's naughty. Like there's like noises and things breaking, and it's just like you
That
can't
drip
do.
drip
Yeah, you
that
can't do anything about it, and it's just haunting you, and that's just terrifying. I thought about a lot of these older haunted house movies that would pull it off like really well, like The Changeling or Burnt Offerings or even the Amityville Horror, like where the house is just like nuts. Like you just do these crazy things and you're just trapped there in a way. And so I wanted to capture that. Amityville they left, but I guess they all
yeah.
left. But I wanted to capture something like if you're in a haunted house, but you're stuck in this haunted house, what does that look like?
Yeah, yeah, it's almost as if the house is messing with you. It's using the inhabitants as entertainment, like playing with them a little bit. That's the chaotic queen in me is, yeah, fuck with them. But then at the same time, I'm like, ugh.
Wouldn't that be terrifying? It's just you wake up in the morning and there's just, or you wake up in the middle of the night and there's something there, and you just like, I can't, like, what are you gonna do? And it's, oh, and people that say that, I kind of thought about the people that say that they live in a haunted house. It's not that easy just to get up and leave your house. You're stuck there. So if you're living in a haunted house and you wake up and you see a shadow, it's, what are you gonna go back to bed? I can't just
Well,
leave
no,
my.
and then the house knows, oh, you trying to leave? Like, you trying to move?
Terrifying. And so I just wanted to write about that. And it's, and then she just accepts it. There's nothing else you can do. It's a family home, but these houses like along the river and Ravenswood, these are like multi-million-dollar homes. They weren't built to be like multi. Nobody wanted to live on along the river before, because people used,
Mm.
from the Union stockyards, they would just dump animal waste in that river, and it was very polluted for a long time. So no one living along the river wasn't necessarily like a desirable thing. It's just now it is, and these homes are like, many areas of Chicago now are just expensive. That I remember, again, I grew up here, and so I just remember some of these neighbors, like nobody wanted to even drive through here, and now there's multi-million-dollar mansions here, and so it's just really wild to see how the city has changed in
Oh
many
yeah,
aspects.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's some of them are like designated as like historical homes, so that drives up the value and all that. But there is some merit to that because yeah, if it was built by immigrants like 100 years ago, it's like not just like a look into the past of like how what was like into that context, right? Like how did they build it? What was the style? What was their purpose? Like they were probably just looking for a place to live or building a community. Not they weren't looking for anything like extravagant. Like they were just doing the bare minimum. And now I'm like, now that obviously we don't need to get into it. Cost of living is horrible. The real estate market is like ridiculous. But there are certain structures that kind of, I get it. I get the value, right? Like I get the authenticity of it and the history behind that. And it's, yeah, some stuff like that is like really fascinating. Like Ravenswood, I haven't spent a whole lot of time there. Grew up, I grew up in the suburbs mostly. I grew up in Berwyn and then
Oh, cool.
moved
Bro,
further
cute,
west.
cute bungalows. Oh my gosh.
Oh yeah.
Whoa. Yeah, so there's a lot of like,
I know. It's
yeah. You're
oh,
in the
go
west
ahead.
suburb. You're in the west suburbs now.
Yeah, yes, west. That's like it's just like a straight shot west. I could hop on the Metro on an express train like during rush hour in the morning and get to downtown in half an hour. So I'm not like, yeah, but like I'm far out enough where I'm like, I don't know, my parents, we when I was living in Berwyn, we encountered some robbery, some theft, some criminal activity. Like our my brother unfortunately got targeted. He was jumped, got his bike stolen. He called the police and then he called my parents. Like that and he was like 9. And so he was just like so that's like what he it's okay. I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. And that's kind of traumatizing and then it's like later they brought it was cuz my mom, she grew up in Chicago, kind of Pilsen area but like 26 in California like where that community lives and my dad all like they met in Chicago. That story of them meeting is a whole nother thing because my dad was he got into a they met at a bar. My dad got in with a fake ID. He wasn't even 21. And my mom was she had been
How-
divorced, so she was like 27. So she wasn't like old, but she wasn't young either. So she was like already like in the process of divorce. And then he was my mom was dancing with another person, another guy, and but he didn't the guy didn't want to go in the neighborhood that my mom lived in and my dad was like, "Was it okay if I call her?" And then the rest is history. So I thought that was fucking romantic and adorable. Maybe my dad was a little bit stupid, but I wouldn't be around if that didn't happen. So I'm like, that's adorable. Like he just, she caught his eye and he was like, "I'm not scared." So my mom, she knows what she grew up. I just remember growing up and she was like a little paranoid. She's just like, "No, lock your windows, lock the doors. We're locking everything, like shut the curtains, blah blah blah. Everybody can see in the house. What are you doing? Close the curtains." And even when we moved out to the suburbs, she still took those little quirks with her where she's just like, "No, everybody can see in the house. What are you doing?" I'm like, "Mom, we live in like vanilla, like white bread neighborhood. Like what? It's like not. We don't live in Berwyn Finer Foods anymore. We're like live next to a Jewel. It's but she just. But I'm appreciative of those little quirks because now I'm like, no, lock the doors, lock the cars, lock everything. I don't care if you think you live in a safe neighborhood. Teenager, simple teenager can come by and just be like, oh, backpack. Like simple as that. But yeah, we lived in Berwyn and then we moved a little out west because yeah, the whole crime thing is because then once the people who they came, the kids that we called it, the cops found them and they returned the bike and they said, "Oh, don't press charges, don't press charges." And my mom was just thinking, they know where we live now. Why did you
Yeah.
bring them to the house? Why did we do this here? And
You
she was
brought
absolutely
that to your house? The
like
cops brought her? Oh, that's crazy
yeah,
town.
that's where how they returned the bike to the house. And yeah. And so my mom's, no, now they know where we live. And she was
Oh God.
exactly right because sometime later, and we had a dog at that point, but it was a detached garage and they stole 3 bikes like shortly after that. And
I
if
believe
me, my insecure ass was like, my bike was the only one that wasn't stolen. So I was like, why didn't anybody want my bike? Aside from the fact that our house like got robbed and now we can't trust anything because now these
it.
known probably repeat offenders know where we live. And they were just kids, right? Like
But
straight up just 12, 14-year-olds that picked on a 9-year-old kid. And it was like after that, yeah, that's why we moved further out west. But even then, that little bit of that protectiveness, little bit of that paranoia still stayed with us when we moved out. But we're still like, I really like where we ended up because we're still close enough to the city where we can just like go spend a day or go spend a few hours and it's no big deal. So that's why I'm like long went off tangent of appreciating Chicago,
yeah,
Chicago history and then just growing up in the region.
yeah. I live like in the city, but we do spend a lot of time out in rural communities, and there's a lot of communities close to the city that we'll spend a lot of weekends. I have friends who are farmers in Wisconsin, and they never lock their doors. Like they used to live in the city, and I think their town is like 500 people or something. And I remember one time I was there, and it's like a farm. They like left Raven. Where were they at? They were, I think, like Edgewater or something. And they left. They picked up and they moved to a farm in Wisconsin. And I was just like so stunned. You don't lock your doors. And I remember falling asleep on the sofa reading one day, and I wake up and there's like two people standing over me, and it was like one of their sons and like his girlfriend. I'm like, and they were just like, yeah, and they just stopped in to grab food. I'm like, just random. I told them, like,
Yeah,
don't. I'm like,
I could imagine like waking up to that and be like, "Wait, are you supposed to be here? Do you
no. Like,
why are you yeah. Should I
what?
be alarmed right now?"
Guys, it was like 3 a.m. and there's just shadows in the kitchen eating, and I'm like, who is in the kitchen eating? Yeah, but farmers don't lock. Some farmers don't lock their doors. I was kind of surprised.
And I can't imagine. Yeah, my husband, he grew up in the cul-de-sac and he grew up in like Schaumburg, so it's like a little bit north, still suburbs. They lived in the city for a hot second until they moved out to the suburbs or whatever, but I think my husband was like 3 when they moved from Chicago to the suburbs. But even then it's, oh yeah, we just leave our garage door open if it's just a short period of time or they just, oh, yeah, it's fine. I understand the concept of a cul-de-sac where it's just it's not it's not visible to like busier streets. But I was just like, okay, honey, we can't don't carry those habits like here. Like when we purchase our own property and like we live in our own house, please just whatever. I'll be the one to lock all the doors. I'll be one and then now we have 2 little boys, so I'm like always no, we gotta wait. Did we lock the doors? Did we check? Can you honey, can you like I'll ask my 6-year-old, can you check the back door? Like, you know.
Kids and dogs. I'm like, we have 3 dogs and 2 kids. I'm like, everything's gonna be locked because there's always
Yeah.
someone doing
You
something.
would hope that the dogs would probably try to
They're
hopefully act
usually
as like a little barrier, like a little gatekeeper, but I my dog, she's a horrible guard dog. She just is excited to make friends. So
oh,
she like
one of our dogs is an Australian cattle hound. And so the reason, and with the mixed with border collie, the reason we got her is because she corrals them. Because she's used to that's like in their nature to like corral the sheep, and so she sees all the dogs and the kids, and she'll just start running around them. It's like you get back where you're supposed to, and she'll
I love
start barking
that. Oh,
if
I
they're like
love that.
not in the place they're supposed to be in the house. I can just like, oh. she's going to get them, and she's telling me where they're at. So that's kind of
That's
nice.
hilarious. I love that. I love that. She's I got you, girl. Like,
Yeah, yeah. She's like my another set of eyes for me because but yeah, I think anywhere, especially as a horror writer, I've written true crime as well. I am paranoid. I have cameras, I have locks, I have all kinds of. I'm just so paranoid. And I think it's because, on the one hand, I think I'm a very positive person and I want to believe that there's a lot of good out there. But then on the other hand, I used to consume a lot of true crime and I backed off after I wrote a poetry collection that was about true crime because it was so traumatic. And it's just
like
these
overload.
overload for a little while. And I was just like, things just happen anywhere. And it's just terrifying. And sometimes I think it's these moments where you just think nothing's going to happen, that something can happen. And so I would just rather be so paranoid at all times. Um, because I almost agree with you with the Ouija board. It's, don't go home. Okay, I won't because I'm safe right here. So why do I have to leave?
Yeah, I'll pay what $100 ticket if as some
Safe.
spiritual energy is telling me no, don't just stay here. Stay no more. You are like the authority for the day right now. Yeah, I no, I totally appreciate that. All right, so I'll dump this on you. What advice do you have for Anna? What advice do you have for Jenny?
Wow. Oh my gosh. What advice do I have? I think for Jenny, my advice would be to practice more self love because I think Jenny is looking to be complete because of somebody else. And because of that, she's so angry. And I think with Anna, similar too, where she was looking for somebody too. I think is for her to accept that she's already perfect the way she is, that she doesn't need anyone to complete her. And I know that there's a love story there, but I feel like she was also very lonely. But I think she needs to realize that no matter what, she has herself and she's okay.
I so appreciated that her and Peter had a connection. We're just like, but then it was like, I don't know, as a reader, I was like, Peter,
I wanted
like,
some.
oh my.
I wanted to create just like a really sweet love story. I didn't want anything so like. Just wanted something like when you were younger, something sweet and connection, and just like a nice conversation with someone. It doesn't have to
Like
be all.
innocent.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
wanted like this really like almost like grade school kind of love affair, which is just so cute. And I wanted to create something like that where it's
And
just
that
two
was,
people.
yeah, like that kind of grade school vibe definitely matched because they were tethered to the house. They didn't have a whole lot of like outside connection. So it would totally make sense. That's the kind of level of little shyness, the little slow to become comfortable with each other. And they build a relationship over just talking and getting to know each other first. And I was like, oh, sweet, sweet summer child. Okay. What is next, Cynthia Pelayo? What are you working on that you can talk about?
That I can talk about. I do go out to the suburbs in my next novel. I can't say which ones because it will give it away. But I will say, and this isn't about the book isn't about this, but I will say it does feature. It does include Bachelor's Grove. It does include many of the area cemeteries, and we talked a lot about which is perfect. We talked a lot about ghosts and wanting to believe in ghosts. I talk a lot about Chicago area paranormal stuff in this book, urban legends. So that's where I go.
Is that
Chicago
fiction or nonfiction?
fiction.
Okay, cool. No, I would look forward to anything else that you put on. I'll have to add your other works to like my reading list. Somehow I will get to them because I'm curious to see what else you got going on. So, okay, Cynthia Pelayo, Forgotten Sisters, March 19th. Thank you so much for chatting with me. I really appreciate all the like insights and anything else you got going on in the future, feel free to reach out and feel free to come back. I'll be so excited to talk to you again.
Great. Thank you so much for having me on. This has been a joy.
Okay, and that was Cynthia Pelayo talking about her book Forgotten Sisters that comes out on March 19th. Rate, review, subscribe, check out the show notes where you can find links to purchase the book and where you can find her on social media and her website. While you're searching online, go ahead and follow Cantina Book Club, subscribe, like all that good stuff. If you need book recommendations, go ahead and check out book reviews on cantinabookclub.com. And if you do like a book and love it, all that good, whatever you're obsessed with it, please go ahead and head on over to Amazon and Goodreads to give them a rating and review. It really does help the authors out. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening.